Everyone wants to be a stealth archer or a stealth sniper. It is very powerful in here in Avowed as well, although it doesn't necessarily work as it would usually work on games like Skyrim, Oblivion, or games like that, or Fallout games, where you're essentially like a spy to some extent and you want to be killing things before they see you. In here, it is still possible, it is still very powerful because the enemies, more than not, are never going to be noticing you, and if they do notice you, you are going to be using some skills that are going to allow for you to continue just dealing tremendous amounts of damage to them. And since this game has like slow motion, it's just so broken and it's so very powerful because of that fact. But in here, for it to work, we actually have to do a couple of things more. We need to have our companions do some heavy lifting, because more often than not, you will notice that as I am playing in here, the enemy icons are to some extent not noticing me, but you have to have companions in the game, and the companions are going to be aggroing the enemy. And since they are going to be aggroing the enemy, you are going to be the stealth sniper, the stealth archer. From the distance, they're never going to notice you, and while they're busy with your companions, that's when you are going to be shooting them one by one. For that, you are going to need a couple of skills, both of your companions, both for yourself, and you're also going to need a couple of weapons. The cool thing about this is that it can either be done with bows, with your regular bows, and arquebuses, which you can get from the very start of the game. And as a matter of fact, that's where we're going to start today's video. If you go to the Dawn Shore, you will find paths right in here. If you continue the questline, you're going to be able to find your way into the Northern Paradise. This is where you're going to find the militia headquarters, and this is where you're going to find your first weapon. It's going to be sold by this merchant right here, and it's going to be the Long Touch. The Long Touch is going to give you plus 10% critical hit chance for power attacks while fine aiming, and then it has a plus 5% damage against enemies with full health. So this is something that you can use throughout the rendition of your whole playthrough. And but if you want to be using arquebuses, then the first one that you're going to find is going to be in the second region of the game. Once you reach the second region of the game, you can go right in here to the Ranger headquarters. All you have to do is just completely run all the way through here, and you'll find these two NPCs in here that are going to start the quest. Now have in mind that this is going to be a very long quest. Remember that at this point you can be using the bow or just a regular basic arquebus, but this is going to be your first unique one. Now there's going to be another very good one on the third region of the game, so essentially you want to go all the way down to Thirdborn. Once you enter into Thirdborn, you're going to turn towards the right, where this is where you're going to find a merchant, and this is the merchant that is going to sell the other arquebus that you can be using for your sniper build, which is going to be the Ismail's Meteoric Apparatus. Killing an enemy deals low fire accumulation to nearby enemies, short range power attacks deal high stun and knock enemies back. However, then again, remember, you always have to be from a distance. You want to be as far away as the enemy possible. I'm just the messenger in here, delivering the message. You can decide which one would you like to be using. The one that I'm using on the gameplay portion in here, I'm not necessarily recommending this for this to be your main weapon for this build, purely because this doesn't come until you reach the final region of the game, and you are going to require to be doing quite a whole bunch of exploration for finding the meteorites. Have in mind that once you reach the final region of the game and there's a quest for delivering meteorites to get special weapons, there's for a sword and there's also for a rifle. And there's enough of the meteorite throughout the game world. There's one meteorite on the first region, another one on the second, another one on the third, and then another one on the fourth. You only need two to get the maximum upgrade weapon, either for the sword or for the arquebus, so you can definitely get them both. Now, we'll talk about the skills for the ranger that we're using in here, and these guys are pretty straightforward. Like, there's no magic nor science in here. You are going to, of course, need steady aim, because this is going to have a power attack that is going to be slowing time by 75%, either with a bow or a gun, so that's very much useful. And then we have marksmanship, which is going to increase the damage that you deal with bows and guns by 50%. The next one, this is going to be the quintessential part of the build, and this is mostly what you're going to be doing all of the time, and this basically as it is as established as possible, the Shadowing Beyond. What this does essentially is that it removes aggro from you, and you also gain stealth attack. However, I'm not entirely sure if this is a bug or not. It's not counting for me, at least when I recorded the gameplay for this. It's probably because it has to be like an instant attack, and the power shots, they have to be charged. So yeah. And then you can also raise it up all the way to the rank 3 to use Essence while you're invincible, and you can reposition yourself. This is not a build that is going to be using skills, so you don't really have to worry about that. And then we're going to take the Sniper, which is going to increase the damage that we deal to unaware enemies. This is more often than not, believe it or not, always working. I have been testing this because as you enter into the Shadowing Beyond and your companions have the aggro of the enemy, you will notice that the icon of them looking for you is more often than not going to be active, provided that you are way as far away from the battlefield as you can, because the enemies are not going to be aware of you. Then we have the Critical Strike, which is going to increase your critical hit chance by 20%, and finally the final stuff that we are going to be taking, and this is just like as established as we can, the Staggering Shot, which is going to increase the stun damage that we deal with bows and guns. Up to 90% stun. This is all the much more powerful when you're dealing damage to the weak spots of the enemies. Now, as for the equipment, we're not actually using anything interesting for the boots, but when it comes to the gloves, you should always be using something that it is going to give you either critical hit chance or critical damage. More often than not, you are going to be dealing critical damage, especially if you're aiming for the weak spots of the enemy. You have these guys right here. There's also, I believe, there's a couple of them in here. The Black Wing Gloves, they give you plus 10% critical damage, and then these are just a downgraded version of the previous ones. Remember that I always have these items on the video description. In here, you want to be using things that are going to give you stats, like for example this that gives you dexterity and perception. Perception is going to be your main stat. Might is also something that you want to have, but you have perception in here. You also have the might things, and the one that give you intellect, like this one that has might, this one has perception. So yeah, that's pretty much what you want to be doing. Now your companions are going to be very specific because they are the ones that are going to be doing somewhat of a heavy lifting. So first we have Kai. Kai is essentially a tank, and every skill that you can get for him, increasing his resistances and increasing the aggro that he deals towards the enemy. So for example, the Unbending Defense. This gives him a health increase and his damage reduction by 25%. We also have the Iron Will, which is going to even reduce the incoming damage by 50%. And then we have the Indomitable Spirit, which is going to increase the health regeneration of the Unbending Defense. And then we have the Second Wind, which essentially every time that Kai is downed, he's going to immediately revive himself with 50% of his maximum health. But if he has the Soothing Wind, that's going to be 75% of his maximum health. And then finally, I like to have the Fire and Ignite, the Fire and Ire, because this deals pretty substantial amount of stun to the enemies, but also it deals aggro, so they should always be focused on him. Now, the second companion is going to be Giada, and she should be focused on keeping Kai alive. So for example, Barrier. Give Kai as many barriers as you can. Give the Greater Barrier to increase the amount of temporary health gain granted by the Barrier, but also if they don't receive enough damage and they still have the Barrier, which is not going to happen that much, but it's still going to heal them by the temporary amount of the remaining Barrier in that. We also have the Reconstruction, which is going to be healing actively Kai, and then the Critical Restore is going to actively heal Kai even more if he is below 20% of health. So this is going to be retroactively working with the Second Wind, reducing as much time as possible before he actually has to go into it. And then we have the purification. This is just basically active healing. Whenever you see Kai dying, you should always be using this thing in here. It's also going to have the boosted essence, which is going to heal the allies by 50% to their maximum health. Very, very good. It also has the essence of shielding, which gives them damage reduction by 20%. So then again, these are supposed to keep your allies alive, not you, because the enemies are always going to be focused on your allies while you are the stealth archer killing things from the distance without them noticing you. If they die, you're going to be in a little bit of a pickle. Now the stats are very simple. The first focus in here should be perception. If you have items like I showed you previously, it should give you a much more critical chance. And as you can see, for example, if I level up in here, it's a 51%. If you add that from the extra bonuses that you get from the skills and also from power aiming and stuff like that, you should always be dealing critical hits. And then we have Might, which is going to increase your overall global damage. This is not melee damage, this is not range damage, this is just overall damage. So essentially, this is the first stats that you're going to be focusing on. And then Resolve is nice, but you're not going to be out of stamina that much. Bows don't use that much stamina. I believe that their arquebuses deal a little bit more stamina, but they also take quite a while for you to load them. So I'd prioritize dexterity over stamina, but that's just me. You can go about this however you want to. And then finally, I would have Resolve in here because the intellect, we're only going to be using it whenever we want to enter into whenever we want to cast the spell when the enemy does manages to see us, which is not going to happen that often. And so essentially the gist of everything for this build is precisely that. You attack the unaware enemies, immediately Kai is going to rush towards the enemy, they are going to start fighting, and then you're going to be killing them from as very far away as possible as you can. Because if you're as very far away as possible as you can, they are not going to be noticing you. And the higher the perception that you have, the maximum range that you are going to be able to have to kill enemies from a distance. It's going to take quite a while because it does require perception. You might be tempted to raise your might first before the perception, but I would advise against it because you do need the range to be able to fight them off from a distance. And then essentially you just keep Kai alive with Kiara and kill things, and whenever they do manage to see you, that you cast the veil so that the enemy loses interest and loses aggro against you, and rinse and repeat until everything is dead. It's very powerful. If you like the content, like and never super appreciate it, and also you that you're a gorgeous beautiful person, you are indeed a gorgeous beautiful person. Subscribe to the channel, you're in Discord. Have a beautiful day, bye.